Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ballpark, the Mets of New York town. Give 'em a yell! Give 'em a hand! And let 'em know you're rooting in the stand. Come on and meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town, of New York town.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Talking Mets here, Rob, with this Mets post-game show. Mets defeat the Phillies 7-5, take 3 games in a row against the Mets in this 4-game series, and the Mets once again find ways to lose in 2023, and nothing more than what you've seen today on this cold, rainy, fall-type day in Philadelphia as the Mets take the field for the first time in 2023, when they know they're officially mathematically eliminated from postseason contention, even though we all know that that was already coming a few months ago. And again, it's just playing out the string at this point. The New York Mets just don't know how to win games in 2023. The constant blown leads, the constant bad defensive plays. I know the wind was absolutely ridiculous today in Philadelphia. It wasn't easy, but they're not the only ones playing on the field. But the New York Mets shown you why 2023 was a complete and utter disaster, even though you can't take a lot into these games anymore because they've been out of it for a very long time. Let's be honest. And it is frustrating, but it is what it is at this point. But also, the way I see it is that if you take any offensive stat from any Mets player over the last month and a half and try to be positive about it going forward, I don't know how much merit you can put into the New York Mets and their offensive. Actually, they've been a lot better over the last 2 months, but guess what? The pressure has been off on the last 2 months. So I'm not really going to take any of their offensive stats and say, wow, this looks nice going into 2024, because it means absolutely nothing. Because when it did matter, they folded under the pressure. And that's where I continue to keep on going with this Mets team. And it goes with the core guys on this team and even the rookies at this point. You know, you love to see what Mauricio is doing. You like to see what Vientos is doing. Beatty has finally figured a couple of things out here. But does that really mean enough going forward in 2024? You know, am I going to count on Brett Beatty coming into next year because he's finally figuring things out this year in September? Or is it the pressure is off and they're just, you know, playing baseball, quote unquote, and that's where we are as Mets fans? But that's all we have to look forward to going into the offseason, because the Mets decided to not play well when it actually mattered in 2023. So the final box score is 5 runs for the Mets, 9 runs, 9 hits, 1 error, 7 runs for the Phillies, 11 hits for the Phillies, and 1 error. So the New York Mets, as a whole, as a fan base, are completely done with 2023. I can't wait for the offseason to talk about things that matter going into 2024. But this is how it continues to go for the New York Mets. You know, they were trying to play out the string, trying to be spoilers, and you just see just the difference of the game and what the Phillies do during games that make them better than the Mets this year. And it's just very simple. They get the big hit when they need it. And that's been the biggest problem with the Mets in 2023. They find way to blow leads. They find way to not pitch well. And when they do put in some offense, the pitching is nowhere to be found. And that's where we are as a New York Mets fan, as a team in 2023. They find ways to lose. A bad team, like the Mets were this year, finding ways to lose any which way, right? Even when they get the breaks in the game, they find a way to give up leads. They find a way to not get the big hit when they need it. They had multiple times in this game where they could have easily tied this ball game. They could have easily, continued innings, and they didn't. They did it a little bit, but not enough. And you always end the game and you always say it's not enough. So is there a bright side to this? Yeah. Brett Beatty's looking better. He has his 5th straight game with a hit. That's nice and all. But again, I don't take no merit at all that these kids of what they're doing in September. I don't think it means absolutely anything going into 2024. I'm one of those people where you better earn it. And September, when games don't matter, don't mean a thing to me, because I'm not going to go back in September and say, well, he looked good in September. The same reason why I'm not going to look at Nimmo's numbers, Alonso's numbers, McNeil's numbers, and Lindor's numbers, probably until from August 1st all the way until the end of the season, because the pressure was off after the trade deadline. None of that matters. They basically padded their stats, and when we needed them the most, they were absolutely dog shit in the middle of May into all of June. And if anybody wants to fight back on that, what type of argument do you have? Because when the pressure was on, that the core folded, and the young kids, even though Alvarez was looking good at that time, other than that, Beatty couldn't play well. Vientos wasn't really on the team. He went back to the minors, and Mauricio wasn't up, right? But where was Pete Alonso in June when his team needed their franchise player, the face of their franchise, to step up big time to put the team on their back? Where was McNeil hitting 60 points left? Where is Brandon Nimmo not being a leadoff hitter we need? Where was Francisco Lindor batting, 210? That is where this team started to fail the 2023 season, started to look like a team that was going to completely blow it, and where they had a chance, they completely lost their chance in June, going 7-16. You can't have a month like that and tell me that, oh, well, look at the numbers at the end of the year. Well, I can say that about a lot of players, but what does that really mean for the overall team? Absolutely nothing. Because I can give you 15 to 16 home runs that Alonso hit after the trade deadline that mean absolutely nothing. The same thing goes for Brandon Nimmo. The same thing goes for McNeil, batting 20 points higher after the trade deadline, where Lindor gets his average up to 250. That's wonderful. But if you're going to talk about one player, and we all know who that is, padding his stats, as a lot of Mets fans love to bring up Lindor, and now he's probably going to hit 30 home runs with 30 stolen bases with 30 doubles. But Met fans don't want to hear that. I brought that up on Twitter the other day, and people are like, oh, well, yeah, great, in a lost season. Well, I can't bring up the good stats for Lindor, but all I see on Twitter is the Pete Alonso good stats. Well, Isn't Pete Alonso padding his stats just as much as Francisco Lindor? Isn't McNeil doing whatever he's trying to do now and looking like the hitter he should have been in the beginning of the season? Shouldn't that have mattered? Doesn't that matter? Or it doesn't matter because it really does not matter, because when the pressure is off, all of a sudden this team acts like they can hit a baseball all of a sudden and play the game of baseball. But now all of a sudden in June, when it really mattered, they look like one of the worst teams in baseball and have one of the worst records in June in Major League Baseball. That's the problem that I do have. And I'm going to keep on going back to June, because when June started, the Mets were in a wild card spot and they were about 3 or 4 games behind the Atlanta Braves. That's where they were at that point on June 1st. So there's nobody to blame but every player on this team. You want to blame the managers, you want to blame the coaches. I blame the players. It's just that simple. Because why is it offensively they look better in August and September when the pressure was absolutely off after the trade deadline, but in the middle of May until the end of June, they were nowhere to be found when they actually had a chance to do some damage in the wild card standings, maybe gain a few games on the Atlanta Braves. Everything with that comes to fruition because the New York Mets, this core that everybody is so afraid to call out in Mets Twitter and in the Mets world of fandom, nobody wants to call these guys out. The Mets core, the Nimmo that got the 8-year deal, the McNeil that got the 4-year extension, the Pete Alonso who's probably going to get an 8 or 9-year deal, and of course Lindor with his massive contract. When are we going to start calling out this core? Because the last player that is going to get paid in Pete Alonso is going to be part of the core 4 that all got their contracts. Are we going to start blaming them after they finally get the contracts? Because nobody's really bitching and moaning about Nimmo when, I love the 25 home runs, but his on base is down. His walks are down. His strikeouts are up. That's not what I need from a leadoff hitter. If you can hit those home runs as well as continue to have those leadoff stats that everybody needs from Nimmo, then great. I'd like that even more. But I don't want more home runs from Nimmo and less on base percentage and getting on base less and striking out more. That doesn't solve, because you've seen what this Nimmo's year has helped this team lose. It's just that simple. It's just how it has been going, right? We need Nimmo to get on base. We need Nimmo to have a higher average. We need Nimmo to strike out less. We need Nimmo to be on base for the guys like Francisco Lindor, like Pete Alonso, right? And that is the biggest problem with the Mets. And Jay, I was just about to say that. This core team, why do we care about how they capitalized in August and September? Because it means absolutely nothing. They lost a lot of games where they had leads. They played bad defense, couldn't catch pop-ups. When they did have leads, they gave them right back. When, the first inning runs were a huge deal, where in 2022, it seemed like the Mets always scored runs in the first inning and took leads. As this year, they gave up runs in the first inning and played from behind, it seemed like every game. That is the biggest problem with this 2023 team. And again, continue to bring up the stats that don't matter over the last 2 months. Like somebody posted, look what Pete Alonso has done in August and September. Wonderful. Why do I care about those numbers? Why do I care about Brandon Nimmo's numbers? Jeff McNeil, Francisco Lindor. Why do I care about those numbers? If you want to give me the numbers of the prospects, all right, fine. They're trying to get their foot in Major League Baseball. I'm not going to go crazy on that, even though I don't really think they actually matter going into 2024 when the games start meaning something again. When Brett Beatty starts to hit home runs to tie ball games and give leads, and Mauricio, raking like he has in September. Once they do that, when games matter, including Vientos, once those games matter and they're doing that, then talk to me. Don't talk to me now about that, because it absolutely means nothing. Because Mauricio hitting 300 and hitting the ball hard as hell and just looking like a ball player, it's nice now. And they have a little bit of pressure of staying in the big leagues. But when the games mean something. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see them hitting. Because what I saw of Vientos, when things mattered, he was not doing anything what he's doing right now. The same thing goes for Brett Beatty. I know he was hurt. He came back. He's looking better. But when the games actually meant something, Brett Beatty was basically Eduardo Escobar, but younger. That was the stats that he put up. That's what we're looking at. And again, this core four that everybody loves, right? You can't say anything bad about the core four, right? Especially Nimmo and Alonso, right? It seems like I'm the only one calling these guys out that has any type of platform. Nobody wants to call these guys out, and they're going to show me their numbers. Why do I care about these numbers when they padded their stats just like everybody else did on this team from August 1st on? Right? In 2021, that's all I heard about Francisco Lindor was, he padded his stats in the second half when the Mets really weren't in a playoff race. That's what I heard. But, no, don't say that about Pete Alonso. No, don't say that about Brandon Nimmo. It comes back to the same issue. Now, if you want to fire Buck, fire Buck. Great. If you believe that Buck Showalter was the main issue why this team is probably not going to win 75 games this year, you have another thing coming because you have no understanding of how baseball works. These players suck. This core sucked when it mattered. Now, was there games where Buck Showalter made bad decisions? Absolutely. I'm not saying Buck Showalter had a good season at all. And if you want to give me, the game has passed him by, he's too old, well, how is Bochy doing? How is Snicker doing? These guys are not 40 years old, right? These guys are pushing 70. Like, let's not act like Buck Showalter is the old man that baseball has passed him by, and this new age of baseball is not what he can handle. Yet, last year, he can handle it. So, did baseball change completely in a year? No, it didn't. Right? Why is Snicker and Bochy having good seasons? Why is Snicker has been one of the best managers in baseball ever since he took over with the Braves? Nobody's talking about his age. The New York Mets, as a core, the players are the problem. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, when Pete Alonso gets his extension from the Mets, and the core four all have their beautiful, shiny new contracts, is that when we're going to start blaming this core? Because as of right now, this core has shown nothing. This core hasn't shown a winning culture. They haven't been a winner, right? They lost the division. This core lost the division. This core was basically playing in September last year when they could have easily won their division and could have maybe took that momentum into the playoffs, right? This core helped lose because it wasn't really the pitching. The pitching was basically fine in September until that series against the Braves at the end of the season. Other than that, where was the core when you needed them last September? Where was the core in the middle of May and June when the Mets were actually in a playoff position and trying to hold a playoff spot and continue to put games in the win column to maintain that playoff position? That is the problem. Until they do that, because, they played extremely well for 5 months until September, but Marte going down in September shouldn't have been the downfall of this team when, according to the people this year, right, Marte isn't a big part of this team going forward. Yes, he was a big part of this team last year, but wasn't Alonso, McNeil, Lindor, and Nimmo were? Where were these guys in September when they didn't need to win a ton of games to win their division? And it goes back to this year. When are we going to start blaming the core? When are we going to start blaming the core? Because Nimmo as a leadoff hitter needs to do certain things well than other things he's doing well right now. Give me 5 less home runs and give me a higher on-base percentage with less strikeouts, because that's what I need Nimmo to do. Nimmo was great last year because Nimmo consistently worked the counts. Nimmo consistently got on base. Nimmo consistently was being the leadoff hitter that we needed. That's why the Mets were so good last year. You know, the Mets basically never really had a number 2 hitter this year with Marte being injured, because I always thought Marte was injured all year. You know, Alonso, again, had a terrible June. His worst month was June when this team needed him most. The same thing goes for Lindor. And it's frustrating because I think this core, the way they played last year, I thought they had it in them. Yeah, easy. Nimmo still had a very good year, but look at the stats that matter as a leadoff hitter, right? He doesn't steal bases. His on base is down. His strikeouts are up. His average is down. We need Nimmo to be the leadoff hitter that he was last year, right? Nimmo got that big contract because basically what he did last year, right? If the Mets believe in him, if they believe in McNeil, if they believe in Lindor and Nimmo, and soon they're going to give Alonso a big contract and show they believe in him. Well, now there's no more excuses. These guys got paid. But what I've seen from this core, when the pressure has been on, they failed. Because if this core, what I've seen in pressure situations have failed, well, guess what? It's very hard to get out from under these players, right? Because their long-term deals are in place now. You give Alonso this contract that you're telling every Mets fan that this core you believe in. And you got to put the pieces around them. But if this core doesn't do their job, it doesn't matter who you put around them because it's not going to be good enough. The core is going to make the Mets going forward. This core, yes, putting guys around them. If Mauricio is going to be a part of his team, Alvarez, Beatty, obviously they're going to help. Putting the pitching staff together with the bullpen and the starting rotation, absolutely. But if this core doesn't do their job in pressure situations, in the biggest moments, this team is never going to win. That's where we really have to pay attention and start calling these guys out. Right? How many of the possible 50 home runs that Alonso could hit and 100 RBIs were in big moments? Those 25 home runs from Nimmo, probably 26 or 27 when the years are done, how many of those really mattered in big spots? Same thing that goes from Lindor. McNeil can't hit 50 points less, and I feel good about the rest of your season. It doesn't make me feel good about you. You mean he is a true leadoff hitter. The stolen bases are a huge problem with Nimmo, but he didn't steal bases last year, but he got on base a lot for the guys that drive in runs. That's the biggest issue. No, easy. It's nothing to sneeze at. But again, I want to see that on-base percentage go up a little bit more. I need the strikeouts down. Because that 272 average wasn't there in May and June for Nimmo. Right? A lot of Mets had really good Aprils, and then they floundered in May and June. Look at the numbers. May and June, the middle of May until June, for the whole month of June, their stats were absolutely dog crap. Now, if Nimmo can get that on base to 380, knock those strikeouts down. But I'm telling you right now, if he knocks those strikeouts down and gets a higher on base percentage, I can guarantee you those home runs are going to go down. Now, if he can increase that on base and lower those strikeouts with that average, with those home runs, I'll take that every day of the week. And the hell with the stolen bases from Nimmo. But those strikeouts are much higher than they were last year. That's where I want to. I'm not nitpicking Nimmo. Nimmo's had a good year, but the strikeouts and on base percentage is why he's a leadoff hitter. That's the problem. If he can do that, have that average with those home runs, that's even better. But give me a higher on-base percentage and knock off a couple of home runs and knock off a couple of strikeouts. Because even Nimmo talked about changing his approach basically in August when it really didn't matter. That's the thing that, well, easy. I agree with that. But Nimmo didn't do what he did last year. Great. He increased his home runs. Where did that get the Mets? Right? I mean, you're going to have Lindor and Alonso. Most likely Lindor's going to have over 90 RBIs. Alonso already has over 100 RBIs. Nimmo needs to be on base more for those two guys. Whoever the second hitter is going to be, those are the guys that get things going for the run producers. That's what we need. That's why the Mets were so good last year, because it felt like Nimmo was always on base. Nimmo was always on base last year. It seemed like every time the Mets had a rally, Nimmo was a part of that. Always on base. Well, I mean, we'll see, right? Alonso wants, according to reports, Alonso wants 10 years. Excuse me, sorry, I just hit my camera. 10 years, and I think the Mets are probably offering 7, and they'll probably come to a middle ground of 8, maybe, most likely. That's what I would think. Well, see, that's the problem, right? Nimmo's contract tells me that Nimmo needs to be a better player, right? Needs to be the player he was last year. And again, there is no mistake about it, right? Yeah, Nimmo was hurt in the leadoff spot because Marte wasn't there being great as he was in 2022. Well, then why do we give Nimmo a huge contract if he needs somebody behind him to be better? How does that make sense? That's what I don't understand. Right? So Marte not being there hurts Nimmo? Is that why Nimmo strikes out more? Is that why Nimmo's on base should be higher? Is that Marte's fault? So we're blaming other players, but not the player itself? I don't understand it. You know, we forget that Nimmo has been swinging earlier in counts, not working the counts like he did last year. Right? Nimmo would, it seemed like every game he would have a 10-pitch at bat. Every game. I want to see that. Now, I'm not killing Nimmo saying he had a bad year. That's not the case. But what we need from Nimmo, if he wants to keep, because I'm going to tell you this right now. If the strikeouts go down and the on-base goes up, the average is going to dip a little bit, and the strikeouts are going to dip a little bit, and I guarantee you the home runs are going to dip a little bit. Because Nimmo launch angle is significantly higher than it was last year. He was trying to hit more home runs. He admitted that a couple of weeks ago when the media asked him about it. So he went back to what he did well last year when it was too late. That same thing with McNeil. He talked about it, that he changed his approach. Alonso, same thing. Lindor, same thing. I just don't get it. And Marte, I don't think is toast. I think Marte came back with 2 core surgeries too early. Remember, he didn't play a lot in spring training because he was still recovering. I said it from the beginning of the year. There's something wrong with Marte. Clearly, Marte wasn't 100% healthy. I just feel like that. What do they all have in common? A high payroll. Because all 4 of them are not going to make the playoffs. Yeah, I don't believe that at all, actually. Because, I mean, you had the same team last year. Were they not a team last year? Or were they all caring about their individual stats? Well, easy. Again, if I bring up Alonso and Lindor, people are going to give me their stats for the year. Yeah, Dylan, the baby Mets should be here next year. Absolutely. Absolutely. But they better earn it. Right? I don't want to give these players, these prospects, the job when they don't earn it. Beatty has not earned the third base job next year. What have you shown me? What, a couple of weeks in September? That's what I'm going to go by? Beatty needs to earn it, right? If In spring training, I said this right when the season was about to start for the season preview. I said Beatty and Mauricio should be here because in spring training, they proved they were better than everybody else. They should have been here. Alvarez didn't look good, so I'm not going to kill the Mets of not bringing him up because Alvarez did not look good in spring. But Mauricio and Beatty, they look good. They earned a job in the beginning of the year. So for whatever reason, they gave it to Escobar, and I don't know where Mauricio was going to play, but because we still had Cannon, we still had Marte, we still had McNeil, but maybe Mauricio could have been a DH. That's it. Yeah, I want Nimmo's on base to be a little bit higher. But can I live? What about his strikeouts? How much more were they? Again, less strikeouts means more contact, more on base. That's what I want to see from Nimmo. There's a lot of times when Nimmo were nowhere to be found. All right. Again, Nimmo has played well in August and September. That also increases his stats. Right. We forget about that. Same thing with Lindor. Same thing with Alonso. Right. Again, I keep on going back to the same thing. Go back to 2021. All I've heard was, Lindor in the second half was padding his stats. That's all I heard. But yet, when Alonso does it, you're not allowed to say it. You're not allowed to criticize. It doesn't make sense. Well, yeah, we need to get back to the basics, but the basics were on base, getting on base, putting the bat on the ball. Right? Nimmo was a huge part of that. McNeil, the same thing. McNeil can't bat under 300 and expect the Mets to have a good season. Nimmo and McNeil were absolutely annoying to other teams. They were pests. That's what Nimmo needs to be. I don't need Nimmo to be a 26 home run guy. I don't need that because the Mets are third in the league in home runs? Where did that get them? 75 wins? Congratulations. Right? Give me less home runs for the guys that I don't need home runs from. Can Nimmo give me a little less home runs but a higher on base, less strikeouts? I'll take that because I know I got Lindor and Alonso with the run producers that I need to score runs with. Well, Mr. X, I don't necessarily know about that because last year weren't these the same players? I don't want to hear about the money because look, Nimmo's had a good year, but a lot of those numbers are also flawed because again, go back to May and June. I keep on going back to those months because those months absolutely destroyed the Mets season, particularly the middle of May until the end of June. For that month and a half, they played absolutely garbage. Those stats matter in that month and a half more than any other month because I don't want to hear about August and September when the trade deadline was over and I hear the players bitching to the media like they were always going on a run. But that same core that was bitching to the media were part of the problem why this team had to do what they did at the deadline. If they played better, it might have been a different story at the deadline. But to turn it on like it was the organization's fault for doing what they did at the deadline, well, the organization made that decision because you absolutely were garbage in the middle of May and June when you forgot how to play baseball. I'm sorry. Alonso can't bat. I think in May he batted 198. In June, he batted like 210. Same thing for Lindor. So, as this game wrapped up, 7-5, Phillies beat the Mets. Mets lose 3 in a row to the Phillies, which is whatever, but they take the field for the first time knowing that they're mathematically eliminated from postseason contention. I know that is not a shock to a lot of people because if you really believe this team ever had a shot, ever since June, it was probably very, very hard-headed of doing that. Well, pinches, but see, what happened to the core? McNeil, Nimmo, Alonso, and Lindor played a lot of games this year. So the other guys around it, yeah, they're the help of this core. But the core was necessarily healthy. I know Alonso missed, 11 games this year, 12 games. But other than that, everybody played. The core has played. Like, the team, the problem is when Alonso is down, when Alonso's not playing well, you need other guys to step up. Lindor, McNeil, Nimmo, the core. The problem is they all sucked at the same time. That can't happen. And that's why I go back. You give these guys the bigger contracts now. Alonso's going to get the big contract. You're the face of the franchise, right? I'm not saying you can't have a slump. Obviously, everybody does. Right? But when your team needs you the most, you got to put your team on your shoulders. You have to. When Alonso is not in a slump, I need to see Lindor pick it up. When Lindor's in a slump, I need Alonso to go. The problem is, if you look at May and June, the middle of May until the end of June, go back to the core guys, Nimmo, McNeil, Lindor, and Alonso. Their stats were absolutely garbage. Absolutely terrible. Not on top of that was the defense of the whole team. They couldn't catch pop-ups. They couldn't turn double plays. They weren't throwing to the right bases. They weren't catching balls in general. And then on top of that, the starting pitching wasn't very good. So all that as a whole, yes, it's a whole team. But if you go back to middle of May and June, there was a lot of close games where offense could have made the difference. They were nowhere to be found. The runs per game in that time span were the worst of the season. When they were hitting 3-3, when they were scoring 3.5 runs per game in that time span, when their average for those other months were 4.5. You know how many more games you would have won in June? A lot of games we lost 3-2, 6-5. We lost a lot of games late in games. We lost a lot of leads as well. You know, early we were giving up. I'm sorry, we were giving up runs early in ball games, and that didn't help. But this core is supposed to be a run-producing core, but they didn't play well at all. Oh, I killed the pitching for years. I killed the pitching for months when people kept on telling me that the offense was the main problem. Pitching was the problem, but they were in ball games, right? We go back to the Phillies series in June, right? When the Mets had a big lead, they blew that game. They couldn't catch pop-ups, just playing bad. That was the offense too. They weren't playing well either. The fact of the matter is, middle of May and June cost his team the entire season. Sooner or later, this core, because we saw what happened to the core in September when the pressure got to them, right? From April all the way until August, they were smooth sailing through the season last year. Once the pressure came, they folded under pressure. This year, when the pressure got to them, what happened? That's the problem. I appreciate the stats look nice at the end of the season, but don't give me one player that was padding his stats and not another player. I don't think they became overconfident. I just think the fact of the matter is that they didn't perform when it mattered the most. That's the only difference. I don't think why should they have? I think they had less confidence going into the season because of what happened in September, losing in the division, and what happened in the playoffs in the wild card series. That's not true, X's, because if you look, then how can they win with Kyle Schwarber and Bryce and a guy like Harper, right? Kyle Schwarber is batting under 200. It has nothing to do with similarities. Those two aren't the problem as long as other guys do the job as well. Again, McNeil batting 60 points less than last year is the problem. Nimmo's strikeouts are high. That's the problem. The on base are the problem. That's the problem. Everybody's average is down. And what you need from Nimmo, a little bit of higher on base and less strikeouts, along with the Phillies own you. No, they don't. They finally took. They'll have one. What is it? If they win tomorrow, they'll win 2 more games of the season series. I mean, they don't own you at all. I mean, you should dominate the Mets the entire season series. You didn't. If you win tomorrow, you win you're 2 games over 500 in the season series. That's not owning anybody. What the Mets did to the Phillies last year in the season, they owned you. What were they? 14-5 against the Phillies last year? That's owning the team. The Phillies didn't own the Mets at all. Yeah, I agree. Again, look at the games that were basically non-existent for the core 4 of this team in June, in late May. The Mets aren't trading Alonso. It's not happening. All right, it's just not happening. Again, the Mets already made their bed, ladies and gentlemen. They already gave this Nimmo a big contract. They gave McNeil an extension. They gave Lindor a big contract. Alonso's going to get that contract. They're already telling you that they believe in his core. No matter if you believe in him or not, they believe in him. It's just that simple. Well, Jay, we'll have to wait and see, right? In 2022, they had a really good season until they didn't. This year was a complete dumpster fire, right? It was the pitching early on, and then when the pitching started to pitch better, the offense was nowhere to be found. It was a team effort of a disaster. Let's be honest about that. From the top all the way to the bottom, from the coaching staff all the way down to the players. It was a complete dumpster fire. Now, can you just wipe this season off and say, all right, let's reset? Absolutely. You can do that. It is what it is. I mean, I thought this team was done ever since the trade deadline. They deserve to have a deadline like the organization pulled off. No, we'll trade what part of the car? Nobody's taking a Nimmo contract. Nobody's taking a Lindor contract. And McNeil, yes, could be traded, but I don't think the Mets are going to do that. And the Mets are not trading Alonso. Again, if everybody believes in the whole nonsense that the media pulled just to get clicks, remember, guys, the New York Mets didn't call teams saying Pete Alonso was available. The Brewers and the Cubs aggressively called the Mets about Pete Alonso. That's a big difference. Picking up the phone and listening is not saying you're willing to trade Pete Alonso. That was never the story. People, this is how stupid people get. Oh my God, the Mets are trading Alonso. That was never brought up. That was never talked about to the fact that where the Mets said they called teams about Pete Alonso. No. The Mets took calls about Pete Alonso. That's a huge difference. You're not doing your job if you don't listen to the conversation, listen to the phone call. I just don't understand that. Yes, no, I understand that. I can do math. I know the Phillies are in the playoffs, but that has nothing to do with owning the Mets. That's 2 different stories. The Phillies played well this year, but owning the Mets is when they played the Mets. If the Mets win tomorrow, it's an even season series. If the Phillies win today or tomorrow, they are 2 games over 500 in the season series. That's not owning. Making the playoffs and playing a team as a whole is 2 different stories, right? The Mets dominated the Phillies last year. How did that work out for the Mets? Where did the Phillies go? Like, see, it doesn't that 2 and 2 together doesn't mean nothing. The fact of the matter is that the Mets already made their bed with this core. No matter if I like the core or you like the core, doesn't matter. The Mets like the core. That's it. I'm always going to root for this team. Again, I root for the letters on the front, not on the back. I can care less who's on this team. I want to win. If Mo, Larry, and Curly are the ones getting us wins, I'm happy. I don't care. But this is the team. This is the core they want to go with. That's fine. I'm going to root for him every step of the way. I'm buying season tickets again, right? This is what I do. I love this shit. Even though they hate me, I love them. I know a lot of you guys do the same. But the fact of the matter is that the Mets make their bed. When is it going to happen when you're going to start talking about this core being winners or losers? Is it after Pete Alonso get a contract? That's when it matters? Because it seems like Alonso gets a pass. Nimmo basically gets a pass because, Nimmo smiles. And again, this is not work ethic. I want to make that clear. This is not Alonso, Lindor, Nimmo work ethic at all. This is not about work ethic. But they have to perform when the pressure is on. Until they do that, they're never going to be the players that we all thought they could be. Because you can put up all the numbers you want. But when the going gets tough and the pressure gets on, this is when they need to step up. Until they do that, when I want to know, because Mets Twitter is afraid to call out Pete Alonso because Mr. X's continues to put up stats of Pete Alonso against good teams. The stats are not very good, right? When the games mattered, when the pressure is on, does this core step up? They failed in September last year and in the playoffs. They consistently failed this year when it really mattered. Well, X's, I don't know. But, I'm not going to go as, it's a New York thing, right? Come on. Boston is a hard-ass town, and they boo their team as well, and they've been winning championships for a lot of years, right? I wouldn't say we root for players more than wanting to win, but the fact of the matter is, you have to start, this core has to start winning. Because Alonso and McNeil, right, they were here before Lindor, right? They've been on losing teams, right? All they know is losing. Alonso, in year number 6 coming up, has one season where they made the playoffs. So we'll see. But the fact of the matter is, the New York Mets better be right about this core because there's no turning back after you give Alonso a contract. Because you're not changing the core then. You're keeping the core for a very long time. Now, is it all about putting the pieces around them that can make the difference? We'll see, because that's probably going to happen this offseason. Alonso's going to get his contract, and they're going to put pieces around them. We'll see if that's enough. But it comes down. This core needs to perform when it matters. Again, I'll always root for this team, even when the Wilpons on this team, and they were giving us a bill of goods and saying Waka was the difference in the rotation and not signing any big names to help this offense. I still went to games. I still bought season tickets. I still, in the first game of the season, still believed. I think you always have hope. The fact of the matter is, I'll be here in 2024. I'll be at spring training in 2024. I already put a down payment on my season tickets for 2024 because I'm absolutely insane, just like a lot of yous are. Right? Baseball is my sport. I love this freaking team. Why? I don't know. They torture me. But I love this team. I travel around the country to watch this team. I was just in Minnesota a couple of weeks ago because I love the game of baseball. I would love for this team to win. I don't know what I would do if this team would win a World Series, right? My teams, Mets, Cowboys, Rangers, Knicks. I saw the Rangers in 94. You know how old I was? 6, going on 7. That's how old I was when my team won a championship. I don't really remember it. I do remember a little bit, but not a lot. I told my father I didn't want to go to the Rangers parade because I wanted to go to school. That's how stupid I was at 6 or 7 years old. Right? I don't know. If the Mets win the World Series, I probably will break down like a child and cry. I'm not going to lie to you guys. That's how much this shit means to me. But I'm not afraid to call out these players either when nobody else wants to. This core needs to step up. Until they do that, they will get every wrath and voice that I can put out there. I will call them out. If nobody else wants to, fine. But I'm not going to be the one to not call out the core when these guys are going to be the ones that are going to be paid. Nimmo's paid, McNeil is paid, Lindor is paid, and Alonso soon will be paid. Sooner or later, you got to earn your freaking contract. Start winning. Individual stats means garbage to me, nothing to me. Help this team win. When it matters most, step the fuck up. That's what I want to see. Because in May and June, the core failed. I don't want to hear about the stats in August and September. Alonso had a great April, had a terrible May and a terrible June. Nimmo didn't play that well in May and June. Lindor was batting 200 in May and June. McNeil hitting 60 points less. That's not going to cut it. When the games matter, when the pressure is on, this core needs to step up. If they don't, this New York Mets team and the belief of this core is going down the drain because you have to win at some point. Everybody's going to have their fancy new contracts. Lindor has it. Nimmo, McNeil, Alonso soon. This core will be paid because the Mets believe in this core. If they don't win, they failed. We all love David Wright. We all love Jose Reyes, right? We all love Carlos Beltran. That core failed. They did not win. I love David Wright. But he didn't win either. This core is young enough and in their prime to still have a chance to put a winning team on this field. This team, this core is in their prime. If they don't do it now over the next 3 to 4 years in their prime, when are they going to do it? When they're all 34, 35, 36 years old? Yeah, I got another thing coming. Oh, we can hope, let's hope that Mauricio, Beatty, Alvarez are the rest to put around this core, along with other guys, obviously, who knows what else we're going to put there, but those guys are going to be good enough around this core to make this lineup even better. Because the Mets are going to go out and spend a ton of money on the rotation, which they probably will. We heard about Yamamoto. That's probably going to be one. I do believe the Mets are going to make a trade for Corbin Burnes. I've said this for a while now. Book it. I think the Mets are going to try hard to get Corbin Burnes from the Brewers. That's just my inkling. I think that's going to happen. The Brewers are not paying Corbin Burnes. I do think they're going to get more for him in the offseason than at the deadline next year. The Mets are going to work together, figure things out, put this rotation together, fix this bullpen. You're going to have Diaz coming back. Raley's coming back. I believe Ottavino has an option. He'll probably be back. Ottavino is better when he's in the 6th or 7th inning. He is not good when you put him in the 8th or 9th inning. That's the problem with him this year. He can be good in the 6th or 7th inning when he's not counted on to be the 8th and 9th inning guy. That's what we have to look at going forward. But they need to figure out this rotation. They got to figure out this bullpen. If this young core, these young prospects in Beatty, Mauricio, and Alvarez, if these guys are the real deal, it could be put around this core of McNeil, Alonso, Lindor, and Nimmo, and sprinkle in another guy or two to help out as well. If they're going to be the guys to help this core, I'm all for it. But let them earn the job. That's all I'm saying. With that said, guys, it's been a tough season. It's rough. It sucks. We're going into another offseason coming out of a losing season. There's a lot of question marks with this team. What is David Stearns? What is Steve Cohen going to do to put a winning team on the field in 2024? We will see how that is. We'll see how that goes. We got a whole off season. We got a lot of live content. We got a lot of content going forward into the off season. I will see you guys. X's, yeah, because I think Cowboy fans are the biggest fools known to man, to be honest with you, and I'm a Cowboys fan, right? Cowboy fans are delusional, right? I don't believe in Dak Prescott, right? The Dallas Cowboys haven't won since the 90s. They've choked in the playoffs year after year after year. Well, X's, I mean, it will fly with the 49ers because San Francisco isn't, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. The fact of the matter is that David Stearns got a lot of work to do. I think he is up for the job, but we have to see it, right? Now he has the smarts that he worked with no budget, with little budget in Milwaukee, and they consistently make the playoffs. Again, they don't have a championship, but I don't know if that's necessarily all his fault more than ownership's fault, because I think if Stearns had a little bit more money, he would have done more at deadlines, done more in the offseason to put a better team, a team that constantly wins, constantly makes the playoffs. And I think they made the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years or 5 out of the last 6. If the Mets do that, that'll be the first time in their history that they've made the playoffs 5 out of 6 years, because they haven't done it 3 years in a row in their franchise. We shall. Well, yeah. Well, that's the other. Look, listen, guys. The Yankees, the Mets, and the Padres, top 3 payrolls in baseball, are not going to make the playoffs. Just think of that for a second. Just think of that for a second. Right? And again, it's not about not spending money and be like, oh, well, don't spend money, bring up all the kids. Well, that's not always going to work. Again, just because the Braves did it and they're successful doesn't mean it's going to work for another team, right? It seems like everybody the Braves brought up worked out. That usually doesn't happen in baseball. That's rare. Good for the Braves. It worked out for them, but don't try to just model after one franchise, because you're going to get yourself in trouble. Because until a team that is not top 10 in payroll wins a World Series, don't tell me that a higher payroll doesn't matter. Because you can't name me a team that wasn't top 10 in payroll that won a World Series. All right? Yeah, they might have made the playoffs. They might have even made a World Series, but that's even rare. Next MLB draft, somebody posted it. Hold on one second. Let me find out for you. Give me a second. Somebody, I think it was, let's see. I got the offseason key dates. Hold on. The 2024 amateur draft is on December 5th. X's, but again, we're so concerned about competing with the Braves. You don't have to make the playoffs by winning a division. We forget that. Right? The 2 teams in the NLCS last year was the 2nd and 3rd wild card. You don't have to win a division to win a World Series. We're too concerned about that, right? That same Braves core won the same amount of games in 2022 than the Mets, all right? So the Mets could win a division. That doesn't mean they are, but winning a division is not make or break of winning the playoffs. Well, Star Wars, and that's the thing when it comes to the Phillies too, right? The Phillies were spending money prior to the Mets spending money, right? Bringing in Harper, what was that, 2019, right? The Phillies started to spend big money in 2019, right? It took them all the way to 2022 to make the playoffs with spending all that money, right? Signing Zach Wheeler, all that stuff as well, right? We'll see. We'll see. But the Mets sped up their farm system getting better when they're probably going to be top 5 in baseball in their farm system. That doesn't only mean that, oh, their farm system is good now. That means we got to get all these kids up. No. What it does, it gives the Mets options in trade options and choosing the right prospects that you're going to keep long term. That's what this trade deadline did for the Mets. It gives them options because when the opportunity comes to make a trade this offseason, they don't have to be concerned about, oh, if we trade these guys, our farm system is going to go down the drain. It won't. That's the difference going into this offseason than the prior two Mets offseason of the last two seasons. We'll see how that goes. The Mets lose 7-5. We got a week left of the season. I will be doing postseason live streams. Don't worry, during games, because postseasons are always fun. I know our team's not in it, but I like to watch the postseason as well. Yeah, X's, that's not true because there's no more pressure from fans than in New York. It doesn't fly. If you listen to sports radio talk, it doesn't fly. So I don't want to hear that about other cities, right? Because other cities don't show up for teams that are actually good, all right? Let's be honest about that, right? We'll see. Yeah, it is about having a good plan. I don't think the Mets' plan was wrong, right? The Mets didn't have a farm system the last two seasons. The only way the Mets were going to be competitive were by spending money. People didn't understand that, which is stupid to me because you weren't paying attention. The Mets had no farm system over the last two seasons. They had to spend a ton of money to be competitive. They don't have to spend as much because they have a better farm system. And it seems like Beatty, Alvarez, and Mauricio could be a big part of that. If they show that they can be a big part of that, the Mets don't have to spend outrageous amounts of money because they have a couple of guys in the pipeline to do that. With that said, well, actually, yeah, but you know what? Let's be honest. Billy Epler's last only two drafts, have done very well. So we'll see about that. But with that said, guys, Mets lose 7-5 to Phillies. We have a week left of the season. Mets play the last game in Philadelphia tomorrow, and then it comes back home for the final games against the Marlins and the Phillies. With that said, guys, it was a great conversation, great chat. Everybody have a great night. As always, Mets fans, let's go Mets. I'll see you next time, guys. Have a great night.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those holes.